In today's episode, we're fixing up a set of Spurs and making a set of new leather spur straps for my daughter to use. She is in need of a new set. We're going to try to take care of that problem. Stick around. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Home Built Workshop. I hope you're all doing awesome. Today, we're gonna have a little bit of fun. We're gonna revisit an older project, something I don't often do. Let's see a show of hands for those of you that remember me making these leather spur straps for my daughter. I actually had to make them a couple of times because some mistakes were made. If you haven't seen that video, there's a link in the description as well as up here in this little thingy card. Recently, while browsing around on the old marketplace, found the used set of Spurs and picked these up for my daughter. Now, I want to try these because they have a different length shank. This portion here that holds the rowel, this is called the rowel. This is a little bit shorter, so it might work a little better. I don't really know yet, but I thought it would be kind of fun to make a new set of spur straps for this, but also I need to do a quick modification to these spurs. The rowel on the back of these is not the right rowel for the horse that she rides, and unfortunately, this set of spurs does not have a removable pin. So I thought, well, I bet we can modify it. If we take a little bit closer look at these, you can see that the rowel is held on by what looks like a brass rivet. On a lot of spurs, there will be a small pin that goes through here with a little cotter pin. That way you can change the rowel out. So I want to see if I can convert this to a removable rowel. And if that goes successfully, then we'll make a new set of spur straps to fit on this set of spurs. That way she won't have to take the straps off the other ones and we'll just be able to slip these on. But I got a different idea for a spur strap that I want to try out. Safety glasses, ear protection, Dremel with a cutoff wheel. Ah! Well, that was a success. Now I've got the old rowels out. We're going to set these aside later because now we're going to be able to swap these out if she ever needs to use this style for some reason. Now we can install the new rowel. These are available online from a lot of different suppliers. They come as a pair with new pivot pins as well as a little cotter key to hold everything in place. This is super simple. Is that not the longest pin you've ever seen? Trim that off. There we go. Cool, with that out of the way, we can now move on to the straps. The reason I wanted to do this first really is because if for some reason it didn't work, well, then I didn't need to make a set of spur straps. So now that we have confirmed that this will work, let's make some straps. On the original set, I used a two-piece design, which is adjustable by a buckle. This is a very, very common design for spur straps, but I want to try something different this time, which will really make this easier to make, even easier than these, and it won't require really any hardware. To make my spur straps, I want to try a one-piece design. It's not going to have any buckles or hardware or anything, which should make it really inexpensive to make. But also, I have taken a one-piece design, really common online, and I've scaled that down just a little bit, about 20% or so, to make it more in proportion with my daughter's smaller boots. Then I've made a file in Fusion 360 that I can print out on the 3D printer, and there's our template. Now, the way I got my measurement was to lay the spur in place on the boot, and you measure from one button up around your boot to the other button. I've made my model adjustable so that you just plug in whatever that length is, and it will scale this portion of the strap right here. Then I can print it out. Bam, there's our template. Let's cut it out. I've got a scrap of roughly 10-ounce leather. This side over here Feels pretty good. This side's a little wrinkly and crusty. We're not going to use that, but this is nice and firm right here. I think it's going to work out really good. If you guys are wondering why there's a weird cutout right here, that was a small effort to reduce the amount of filament needed, but also it leaves kind of a nice even border. If you wanted to cut this out, maybe glue a contrasting piece to the inside, just a little decorative element if you wanted to use it. For these, I'm not going to use it at this time. I'm cutting these pieces out by hand using a nice sharp X-Acto knife. This was a little bit harder than I thought it would be. I don't know if it's because this leather's a little bit dry and hard or what the deal was. It took a little bit of time, but just slow and steady, I was able to get it cut out. That was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I think this leather might be getting a little bit dry. We're definitely going to have to apply a good coat of oil on it. With that work out of the way, now I can move on to getting the holes punched in the slot to allow the button to snap into place. On my template, I've got a couple of alignment holes. One of them is where I need to punch the hole for the button, and the other one is the length of the slot, which will give a little bit of room when you're trying to snap the button through the hole. I'm going to cut this slot first, then punch out the hole. I want to do the slot first, that way I don't damage the edge of the hole, causing a weak point in the leather. There's our buttonholes. And now, just when you thought you could get away from it by not working with wood, we still are going to sand. Just going to lightly sand around the edges just to clean the cut edge up before going around with a beveling tool and putting a bevel around all these edges. Can't get away from it. With the edges lightly sanded, it's now time to add a bevel to the edge. I'm just using a little beveling tool to cut about a 45-degree bevel on the top and back edges of the leather. For some reason, I really like the sound this makes. There we go. I'm ready to slick the edges, and if you're not familiar with that, when you slick the edges, you're basically burnishing the edge, kind of sealing it up, preventing moisture and other things from getting into the edges. I usually just moisten the edge with water, and then you can use a hand slicker, and you just burnish around the edge, and it develops kind of a shine to it, so you can tell you're getting there. These hand slickers are really inexpensive. They work pretty well. It does require a little bit of energy as you rub it back and forth to get that edge nice and burnished, but they do work good. I'm going to try a powered version of basically this same thing. First, I'm just going to use a little water and moisten the edge. You don't need to get it sopping wet, just a little bit damp. And then over at the drill press, I have another burnisher. This one is really cool because you just chuck it in your drill and then using the drill power, burnish your edges as it spins. It has a bunch of different sizes for different thicknesses and things. This thing works really cool. Hopefully you can see that the edges start to get glossy as it gets burnished down. You want to keep burnishing until you get that glossy all the way around. I'm going to be installing some shiny conchos on these later on, so I'll lay out for the hole locations and make those holes using a hand punch. Now we're ready to apply some dye. Here's one for the history books. The dye that I'm using is a chocolate color, and it's going to match this pair of cowboy boots really well. I ended up applying 2 coats in all, including the front, the back, and the sides. As soon as the dye has dried, I'll apply a coat of neat's foot oil to start getting some oil back into this leather. I'm applying this in a very light coat. I don't want to over oil it and risk the exact same thing that happened when I made the original set of spur straps. Too much oil seems to make the leather stretchy, kind of like a rubber band, and that's not what we want. I'm going to set these aside for just a little while and give this oil some time to soak in, and then we're going to apply a sealer because we don't want this dye to be rubbing off. The sealer that I'm going to use is called Tan Coat. This stuff's really cool because it not only seals in the dye, but it also allows you to re-oil it. It doesn't build up a thick finish like maybe a lacquer or a polyurethane does on wood. The oil is still able to go through the coating into the leather. That way you can maintain the leather, but it's going to lock the color all in place. And another benefit, it smells awesome too. Now this stuff's really easy to apply. You just wipe it on quickly. You gotta work quickly because it tacks up really fast. Wipe it on really quick and then it'll start to tack up. At least in my climate, it tacks up really fast. Once it starts to tack up, you just go back and buff it off. You can apply that a couple of times and you'll get a nice coat on there. It also gives it just a little bit of a gloss. Now just that quick, this piece is already tacky. So is that one. So I'm just gonna give it a quick buff. Depending on your climate, it may take a little bit longer. Seems like here our humidity is so low that everything just dries really fast. I'm gonna apply this to all sides, the front and the back, as well as the sides. That's all there is to it. Now we're ready to add a little bit of bling. Now it's at the request of the owner of these spur straps. That would be my daughter. She's a tough customer. She has requested some shiny stuff on here. So of course, the customer's always right. Isn't that what they say? We got to put some shiny stuff on there. She wants some spots. Of course, we're going to have the concho on there. Now, if you're not familiar with spots, they're really just little shiny dots. They get pressed into the leather. I've got a modified arbor press here with a spot setter on here that will allow us to quickly place the spots in there and set them into the leather. Spots are also pretty easy to do by hand. There's little hand setters you can use for these. They make a really nice decorative element. You can install them in any sort of pattern or however you want to do it. They make these in different materials. We're just using some shiny kind of chrome ones, but there's brass and copper and all kinds of different ones. Really a neat accent and something kind of fun to play with for your leather projects. Now, in order to lay out these spots exactly where I want them, I'm going to go ahead and install the concho because we're going to work around the location of that. Now, these conchos are kind of cool because they are the exact same concho that I used on my daughter's saddle stand, and I had to buy a pack of 4 or something like that, and these are left over, so it's going to match that as well. Plus, it looks pretty cool. It's already shiny. Look at that bling. Now what I want to do is work out a pattern that basically starts from the edges of this concho and keeps within the same profile of the strap. To get a line that follows the outside profile of the spur strap, I'll use a compass and ever so lightly draw a very light pencil line around the edge. Using this little spot setter really makes a huge difference. It goes up in this little adapter. There's a little anvil down here. So all you do is take your little spot. These are size specific, so you have to have the setter for the spot you're going to use. You press it up in there. And there's a spot. And we'll just repeat that process until we have all the spots installed. spot setter does a really good job of bending the tabs around so they don't snag on anything, but I like to go back around with a little tack hammer and just give them a little tappity tap to make sure it's nice and flat. With all the spots on, there's only one thing left to do, and that's to put these on our newly modified Spurs. This is always the tricky part. And there's our brand new set of Spur straps on our modified Spurs, ready to be put to use by my daughter. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I like these little projects you can knock out in a few hours and really have a cool and useful piece when you're done. Really gives you some good satisfaction. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. We'll see you next time.